Today is going to be a great program on the show. Advance with Mike Acker. I got Chandler Bolt. Chandler's book published is one of the main reasons I am doing everything that I'm doing. It launched my career in this whole leadership and communication space. So I'm looking forward to sharing what impacted me with you. But not only that, to give you some ideas of different things that you can do to leave a legacy, to leverage your impact, and to make the difference you want to make. Check it out.
Welcome to Advance with Mike Acker, the podcast designed to help entrepreneurs, business leaders, and professionals alike break through barriers by improving their practical leadership skills and increasing confidence in speaking. Your host is a best-selling author, executive coach, and founder of the Advance Public Speaking School and Advantage Publishing Group, two companies dedicated to providing an edge for leaders. Find out more about Mike at mikeacker.com. Now here's your host, Mike Acker.
Hey, welcome to the show. Thanks for being on it with me today, Chandler.
Mike, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
This is fun because a lot of times I talk to people and they're actually newer to knowing just our work together, but I've actually now known you for a couple of years. So it's fun to be on this, but other people don't know you. So tell us a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, so it's been fun, Mike, to work together on your book stuff. I feel like maybe I'm forgetting if you've been on the Self-Publishing School podcast, maybe at some point. I know we've done a ton of stuff together. So it's been fun, but yeah. So I run a company called Self-Publishing School and selfpublishing.com. We help people write and publish books in as little as 90 days that grow their impact, their income, and their business if they have one. And so I always say, think of it kind of like a business accelerator or a year of college, but for writing and publishing a book. So we're really good at helping people get their books published and get their books done. We believe that books change lives, as you've seen with your books, Mike. But books change the lives of readers. So the people who read those books, which for those of you listening or watching, how many of you have had your life changed by a book? Probably everyone, right? And so they change the lives of readers, but then also they change the lives of authors. So we always say it's not about the book, it's about who you become in the process of writing and publishing that book. So our goal and our mission is to change lives through books, and specifically to help 100,000 people write and publish a book by 2035. We're about 6,000 books published so far. So a lot of progress in 6 years, but a long way to go before we get to 100,000.
And there's a whole bunch of different ways that you help people. Of course, you have some online programs, you have some kind of mastermind type groups, you have some on-site type things that you do, you have a done for you project, but you have a very simple way that you help people as well. And I'm holding the copy of Published by Chandler Bolt. And you are doing something new with this book. So let's talk about that right up front, and then we'll inspire some people with stories and different tips that they can get.
Yeah. So, basically what I've written, and we're about to publish a second edition of my book published. And so the first edition, has been sold and downloaded hundreds of thousands of times. And, a bunch of people have just read that book and wrote and published a book. I know you were given an example of a friend who did exactly that. And that's how you end up finding Self-Publishing School. But the book is, we've evolved as a company in all of our trainings and curriculums. And, we do 1,000 coaching calls a month with students and all that stuff, but the book hadn't. And so I read it and I'm like, man, this sucks. A lot of, it's good, but it's just what we've taught or what we teach has gotten so much better.
Yeah.
And so I did a second edition and it's coming out December 14th. So depending on when you're listening to this or watching this, either it's about to come out, it just came out, or it was a long time ago and you can still grab a copy. So it's the second edition of the book. It's new and improved. I'll talk about this more at the end, but one thing I'm going to be doing specific for this audience is first 50 people to grab a copy can get a copy for free. So I created a little link. It's publishedbook.com/Mike. Shout out to Mike for hooking everyone up here. So publishedbook.com/Mike. Literally all you have to do is fill out a form and I will ship you a physical copy of the book for free. You don't have to pay for shipping. You don't have to pay for printing. I'm probably going to regret this when I get the bill from all these books. But first 50 people, if you go to that link, I'll give you a free copy. Otherwise, you can just grab it on Amazon.
Great. And I'll make sure that's in the show notes and the YouTube notes down below too, so that you don't have to go back and real quick grab that again. But let me go through a little bit of the story, because the difference of many people, I mean, I've watched Chandler on some different podcasts, is often he's telling the story of others, but I am one of the stories from Chandler.
Yeah.
So it's fun that when I was an executive at the time, and I was working on the side, just coaching people. And this lady, Rachel Richards, reaches out to me, and she's now all over the place. She's doing fantastic. And she had this big event to come to. Short story is that she had written a book and people wanted her to come speak. Like you said, she wanted to help people. So she wrote a book about millennial money management. It's called the Honey Money. And so it's fantastic work that she does. So a university reaches out to her to come have her speak. She works with me as my side gig on coaching people in public speaking. She challenges me to write a book. And she says, you should write a book. And I said, well, how do you do that? How do you go about publishing a book? So what did she do? She pointed out publish. Now I went online, I got the audio version, I listened to it. I went online, I'm very thorough, and I found Chandler's other book launch, and listened to that as well. But don't get that one, get published, right? Is that right, Chandler?
Oh, for sure. I mean, especially the second edition, it's way better. and so way better than book launch. Don't buy book launch. Just get this book. Honestly, the book launch is a long time ago. This is way better.
So I didn't listen to that advice. I got published and book launch, listened to him, very thorough. Then I checked out Chandler Bolt, just looked him up, found that he was doing a webinar, attended. I actually ended up signing up for a program that they have to actually coach people through authorship. I'm very thorough in that regards. I did every single thing in the course, which is basically published on steroids, with us people in a community walking you through. Joined the mastermind community, went to a conference, went all in, but only with the book and some coaching, I ended up writing Speak with No Fear. And Speak with No Fear has since gone on to be an international book. It's now translated into 3 different languages. And when you said, Chandler, that books change lives, not only did it launch everything that I'm doing, but I had a person call out to me, and this is many times, I've had a person call to me and who picked up my book from the Minneapolis airport, flew out to meet with me before I was doing this full time. I'm still working in corporate America, flies out to meet with me, sits down and says, your book changed my life. And it's like my Bible, which I thought was a little sacrilegious, but it was a really cool thing of being able to influence his life. Other people have left some reviews. Among the 600 reviews, I got some that say this is trash, this is garbage, but the majority of them talk about the life transforming. And this is one of the things that Chandler does. So Chandler, talk to us a little bit about how do you even go about starting a book, or maybe someone's out there like me going, oh yeah, I've thought about it, but how do you even get going outside of buying your book and get into that? How do you even think, man, I got a book inside of me?
Yeah. So there's probably, I would assume, 3 groups of people. They're listening to this or watching this right now. I've been thinking about writing this book, and either I haven't started or I haven't finished and published it yet. So that's group 1. Second group might be, hey, I've actually published a book before. It's just not really doing much. And then third group of people is like, hey, I've either got a book or want to do a book to grow my business specifically. And so what I would say is, especially in the book, I kind of speak to the whole process, but what I would say, especially for the folks who are in that, like, I haven't started yet or haven't published yet, is it comes down to a few things. So, first, obviously getting clear on what you want to write about, which I always say it's what are the broken record conversations that you're having with every new client or prospect, if you're a business owner, or almost everyone is a knowledge worker, meaning we have a job or we do a business. So we have years or decades of experiences that we wish, like, there's all these things. It's like, man, I wish I would have known this when I first started. Right. And in that knowledge is a really great book. And so for a lot of people, that's the best place to start. I would assume that was probably somewhat similar for you with your first book. But so getting clear on the idea, but then moves into what I call the more writing method. And so it's mind map, outline, rough draft, editing. Okay. And so that's the process that we teach. So it starts with a mind map. And for folks who, if you've seen me speak a bunch, Mike, and I obviously talk about this in the book, but for me, on any training I do or speech that I do or anything, it's all about the mind map, because I just find that just sparks ideas for people, and they say, hold up, I can actually write a book about this. So my one piece of advice for anyone listening or watching this would be, as soon as you finish listening to or watching this, grab a blank sheet of paper, put your topic in the middle of the page, and put a 15-minute timer on, and just start brainstorming all the things that you could write about on this book topic. And then from there, you use the mind map to create an outline for your book. And then you move into the rough draft phase, and you do that one chapter at a time. And so you start with chapter number 1, mind map, and then outline the chapter, and then write the chapter, and then repeat that process chapter by chapter by chapter. So that's the process that I recommend for most people to get started. And then there's a bunch of things about how do you make sure that you're intentional about this book, so that it leads to the outcome that you're hoping for yourself, for your business, et cetera.
I think the biggest holdback for a lot of people is, what would I actually write about? And because I've chatted with a couple of different people, and that's the thought that comes up. So I know you briefly touched on this, but can you dive more and further into that question?
Yeah, no doubt. So I think for a lot of people, I'm a C-level English student and a college dropout with ADHD. So kind of the last person you'd ever expect to write a book. But a lot of people, they're either intimidated by the writing, or they're thinking, gosh, what could I write about? Like, I've got something that I could maybe write for 5 minutes on, or maybe write 5 pages, but not a full book. And that's where I'd really encourage you, is to say, hey, what are you passionate about? Or what do you know a lot about? What do you do for work, or in your job or in your business? Or if you have a business, what are the broken record conversations that you just keep having over and over and over again with prospects or customers? And in those conversations is a really great book. And so it starts with narrowing in on an idea or two, but then it says, okay, take 15 minutes to do the mind map. And then if you have a little bit more time, take another 15 to 30 minutes. And that's where, for most people, they'll go from, I'm not sure if I have enough to write about, to, holy cow, I've got 2 or 3 books, and then I just got to figure out which one to write first. And almost without fail, that's the outcome of that process. And so it starts with kind of no filter, getting ideas onto the page. And then from there, you can crystallize and distill into the outline, which will make the writing process easier and all that stuff.
I think one of the things that you talk about so well here is that you got the mind map, you got this outline, and then it's the consistency of doing something every day. Yes. You think about just like John Grisham and Jerry Seinfeld and some of these people who are well known in their craft, and they would just commit to doing something every single day. So when I went through it, I used one of the spreadsheets that you have on Google, and it tracks how many words you wrote every day. So I committed to writing 1,000 words every day in 27 days of just methodical work. And there's some days I worked longer on it. I would write 1,000 plus words, ended up writing about 30,000 words altogether for my first book, exactly along the lines of everything that Publish says. Remember, I went through it twice and ended up with this rough draft. Another thing that you say is, don't go back and edit it as you write. Why do you say that?
Yeah, so we all know someone who has 5 perfectly written chapters in their unfinished book, right? And if you're listening to this or watching this now, maybe that's you. And the truth hurts, but the truth will set you free. But it's, we always say I only have 2 writing rules. Rule number 1 is do not edit while you write. Rule number 2 is you can't write more than 1 book at a time. And so if you try to edit while you write, you'll just end up with a perfectly written, unfinished draft.
Yeah.
Right. And so the most important thing as an aspiring author is to get the rough draft of your book done as quickly as possible. And so there's this magical thing that happens when you get your rough draft done is you start to believe that this is possible, and you start to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And so that's what I would recommend for folks is if you're thinking about doing this, laser focus on that rough draft. Nothing else matters. Your title doesn't matter. Your cover doesn't matter. Your marketing plan, any of those things. It's all right. How do I focus on getting the rough draft done? Because once you do, you'll start to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And it's hard to get your rough draft done quickly if you're editing along the way.
Yeah, that's definitely what I found out. That was one of the things that hit me the most when I read and went through the book several times was don't edit. Because when I was 27, I had written a book, and I had, as part of a master's program, and I kept on editing it. So I eventually actually published it. It's the third book I published through the self-publishing system. But when you go through it, the first part of the book is better than the rest of the book, because I exactly did. I would write, go back and edit, write, go back and edit, write, go back and edit. So the first several chapters have been edited far more than the latter chapters. So when I went through the self-publishing system a couple of years ago, 2.5 years ago, I just wrote, and then actually Rachel, who I just showed there, she was my content editor. She went through and she said this is some great additional advice here, is get someone who absolutely believes that you're awesome, that your message needs to be heard, and who will be ruthlessly honest about what needs to be changed.
Yes.
So I read her comments, and because she had been so gracious to me with her words, like, this needs to be heard, this is great, I read them. But then I will admit I was absolutely crushed because she tore it apart and all kinds of critiques. Then I went through and I edited it, and some of it I didn't listen to her advice, and some of it I did. And in fact, 6 months ago, I went through a full second edit and rewrote the book, some of it because it needed to be redone.
Yeah,
but that was hard in and of itself. What other things do you think keep people away? Because the writing and editing is something that keeps them away. The not thinking they have something to value, to give. What else do you think is reasons why people don't?
Yeah, well, you kind of spoke to, I think there's the hardest part is of the whole process is getting your rough draft done.
Yeah.
And so it's just, we've seen, I mean, we have tons of data on this. Obviously we've helped publish about 6,000 books over the last 6 years. So the differentiator is if people finish their rough draft, they are just significantly more likely to publish. If they don't, they're significantly more likely not to publish. And so that's kind of the dividing line of finishing the rough draft. That's the hardest part. Second hardest part is what you talked about, which is self-editing. And I mean, it's just a demoralizing process. You're like, this book sucks. I suck. Why am I even doing this? This was a dumb idea. Hold up. This is actually getting good. Wait, that was awesome. Right. It's just like kind of this roller coaster of emotion. And so I just experienced that doing the second edition of my book. It's like, you're in the throes of editing, and it's like, oh my gosh, this sucks. But then, then you kind of finally turn that corner and get to that point where you're like, oh man, this book is really good. And so those are the two hardest parts of the process. But you asked the question, what keeps people from even starting? And I think that's you can't get your rough draft done if you don't first get started. And so for so many people, their biggest excuses is, I don't have time. Like, oh, I'm busy. Or, hey, the timing is just not quite right, which is really just a disguise for I don't have time. But I think people think there's going to be this magical time where they've got no job, no business, no kids, no responsibilities. And that's when they're going to write the book, right? It's maybe someday, maybe next year. But for most people, maybe someday becomes maybe never. And I just lived through this a bit where I knew I needed to do the second edition on this. And I just kept pushing it. And finally I was like, okay, this is the best thing that I can do to grow this company. Like, I need to start. And it's just having that commitment to, all right, I've got to start this process, and you're going to have to get started before you're ready. So, for most people, it's taking that first step and actually getting started, because the timing is never going to be right.
The timing part, I remember when the pandemic happened and everybody was locked down, there was some celebrity who said something like, I wish I could remember who it was in the exact words, but basically I just proved my wishful thinking wrong, because I always said if I had time, I would do it. Now I have all this time and I've not done it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's actually, and what I found out from leading nonprofits in the past is that it's actually the busiest people who get the most work done.
Yes.
And when I wrote this book, I was coaching
Yes.
on the side, maybe 5 to 10 hours a week, kind of a side paid hobby. And then I was working full time in an executive role. So I actually wrote the book. I'd get up in the morning, shower at 4:30 in the morning with a cold shower, get my cup of coffee, sit down on my computer at 5 a.m. and write till 6. And then I would finish up, get my son and my wife and all that kind of stuff and go off to work day. And then one weekend I had my dad watch our son and I wrote for about 5 hours, but most of it was every single day at 5 a.m. in the morning.
Totally.
It just being that commitment. And I would say this, Chandler, that I think that if you're building a business, it's a great authority piece, because my sister's a real estate agent. So I was telling her that, hey, this would be good. But also if you just have something you want to share, one of the things I like about it is I have now written, this was my second book, Right to Speak. That was my third book. I don't have it with me right here. My fourth book, I co-wrote with Lead with No Fear with an executive coach. And he thought that was so much fun to do. My fifth book was Connect Through Emotional Intelligence. My sixth book was Speak and Meet Virtually. And my next book comes out, the seventh book comes out in January, and then I have 3 workbooks. But here's what I've realized on this is, as I've written, I have left a legacy behind for my son.
Yeah.
That there's stories that I put on paper and lessons I put on paper that he'll be able to go back and go, wow. Well, what are some of the stories that you've heard? I know that I'm actually one of the stories that sometimes gets talked about in the whole realm of your business, but what are some other stories that might just encourage the listeners? Because I got people all across the board who are going, that's cool that people write a book, but that's not for me.
Yeah.
Or maybe they're thinking I should write a book, but I've never really thought about it. What other stories do you know about?
Yeah. I mean, I love your story. You're a machine, man. Just cranking out books. That's awesome.
You know what? I think I did a little too much this year, but I'm gonna slow down next year.
Yeah. You got the opposite. Maybe someday. I got that same one too. It's like, hey, maybe someday I'll slow down. And sometimes I think for a lot of folks, those times it's like your next year could be the year of marketing the books you already have. Mm-hmm. Right. So it's not the next book. It's all right, I'm going to double down. And it's a concept I talk about in the next version of Published is the 1-year launch. And so it's taking one of your books and saying, all right, I'm going to market one book for an entire year and use that to grow the business. And I talk about getting more leads, sales, and referrals. So how do you specifically use either your best selling book or your best converting book would be the way that I would look at it, is the one that most leads people to end up doing business with you, and then focus on using that book to get more leads, more sales, more referrals, do a relaunch, do a big promotion. I think some of those chapters in the book, I think you'll really like. But to answer your original question on stories, I mean, one of my favorite, I know you've heard this, you talk about with your kids and the legacy for your kids. And so obviously Sean works at self-publishing school now, but Sean was a self-publishing school student, one of the first ones. He wrote and published a couple of books on physical therapy, which is his occupation. And his daughter saw him do it and said, hey, Dad, that looks awesome. I'd love to write a book too. And he said, all right, hey, why don't you go write 50 words and come back to me, thinking she wouldn't do it. And then she came back a few hours later and she had 50 words written. And kind of fast forward, and Emma ended up writing and publishing a book called The Fairies of Waterfall Island at 8 years old. So a kid's book. The book made, I think it was about $4,000 in the first 3 months. Donated all that money to a charity for autism awareness. She was on all sorts of local TV shows. She ended up starting to speak. And so she did some speaking gigs locally. I think the first one was, she made $1,200. I think they gave her like a $250 honorarium, and then she sold a ton of books. It was like a local school. And then it did another one that was like maybe $600, $700, $800. And now it's like she has a monthly quote unquote allowance, which is the book royalty checks that she gets every month. She's paying for school field trips. I think I love that example, because if you look at 8-year-old Emma and just the trajectory of her life, like the confidence that she has, the opportunities that she has, like all of the doors that has already opened up, but then that will open up in the future. I mean, it's just crazy. And so that's what I think is, it should be inspiring for parents is, parents, your kids are watching, right? Yeah. And when they see you commit to a goal that you have and go do it, that inspires them. And they see mom and dad chasing their goals, and it can inspire them broadly, but sometimes directly. Like, that for Emma writing a book, and then now that's like, we've got a bunch of SBS employees, like their kids are writing books. We've got kids showing up to self-publishing school conferences because they heard Emma's story. She came on the podcast, like all that. So just the ripple effect, I call this leveraged impact. It's the ability to do work once, you create this book, and then this book goes out to impact thousands, tens of thousands, maybe even millions of people. But then it's like, if one person that you inspire then goes on to write a book as well, it just kicks off the same ripple effect of, okay, now that's 1,200 more people or more impacted from that book and that book and that book. And it's really inspiring. It kind of starts to sound like an MLM,
but it's not. It's not.
You just know two people. But really, it's like it's this ripple effect of impact through books being published.
It's true. That's really what Rachel did, right? She got the first edition published.
Yes.
She read it, and then she said, "Hey, Mike, let's do this." And she was actually on this podcast / YouTube. Early on, she was one of the first guests, so you can go back and check that out. And she just does fantastic. And then in her second book, both of her books have first book has over 1,000, second book has over 700 reviews. Yeah. And her second book is called Passive Income Aggressive Retirement. And actually, she talks about how you can write a book, and she actually refers to published. I think there's a picture of Chandler in the book. Unbeknownst to you. And in that, she talks about that. And that's one of the questions that people have said is, do your books make money? So one answer is they can, but not every book has to make money. So I'd love to know, in your thoughts, what are some of the outcomes that can come from just writing a book besides money? Now, my books make money, and not all of them, but my number one book, my first book that I continue to promote and on podcasts and such, and continue to run ads for, makes money. Why are some other reasons that people would just say, I want to write a book because this?
Yeah, there's 3 or 4 main ones. So there's the impact and the legacy piece first and foremost. So it's long after you're off this earth, this book or these books are still going to be here. Yeah. Right. And so that's the leveraged impact that I talked about. There's passive income through royalties, for sure. If your book does really well, that can be very lucrative. For most people, it's a negligible amount, but it is something where it's like, hey, 6 years from now, truly passive, like that's a book that still sells. I get a check. Maybe it's $100, maybe it's a few $100, but hey, that is an asset that I've created that brings in royalties. But more importantly, I think for a lot of people, and especially for business owners, is how do you set up an evergreen asset with this book that brings in leads, sales, and referrals? Mm-hmm. And that's, really the question is how you use a book to grow your business. But I look at specifically through those 3 things. How do you do that? And so, for me, I know that this is why we're scaling really quickly. We've got 35 or so full-time employees, and in the midst of that, in the midst of moving, in the midst of acquiring a couple companies, I think I traveled 20 days in the month of the 45 days that I wrote the draft of this book. In the midst of all that, that's why for me, it was, this book is most important, because I know that the book currently brings in hundreds of thousands of dollars a month, not hundreds of thousands of dollars a month, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. That's misspoke. But brings in hundreds of thousands of dollars a year easily. And that's not in royalties. That's in leads, sales, and referrals for a self-publishing school. And so it's one of the best assets that we have and can create. And so
I'm going to add on to that. It's not just even that it brings those in for me, it's brought in the authority. When people go, wow, you have a book that has over 600 reviews and it was written up on Forbes.com and you have 10 books. Wow. That's one thing right there where it becomes this person knows what they're talking about. Some other public speaking coach or executive coach has maybe one book or no books.
Yes.
But
Yes.
Mike has 10.
Yes.
And this means that there's a lot that he has to share and a lot that he has to help me with. And I've had people reach out to me. I mean, some of the fun calls. I don't know if you know all these calls. So I got a call from one day, just called my cell phone, right? And I pick up, it was Mike. And he goes, the Mike? The Mike? And I'm like, yeah, this is Mike. He goes, this is so-and-so from United Arab Emirates. And he worked for the royal family. He worked for the king in Dubai. And then I had another person from Kuwait call. I had people who signed up to work with me in Sweden, Germany, England, Paris, Zambia, China, and all over the world. So that impact has been just fantastic. And it's just led to more and more. And so one of the things I thought would be fun having Chandler on the show, and I told him beforehand, was thank you, Chandler, because your book, without even me planning on doing anything, and I had a great role, a great thing, it led with the pandemic, it led to a whole new world. So you never know what happens when you act on an idea, or like my dad, he's a lawyer. He doesn't need the income, but he had a story in his mind. And so I used the self-publishing system to launch his book, and he's got over 100 reviews. And for him, it's just the satisfaction of having a published book.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. That's so cool to hear. I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's close up with just some things about business real quick too, because I love what you're doing on the business end of things. So you wrote this book, you launched this course, you got this business that's growing, got 35 different people. I was part of a mastermind type group that you led for a year. And so if you're just talking to some entrepreneurs, some managers right here, and you're thinking about their influence, what is something that you can give us as a nugget for just saying, how can we leverage our influence as leaders, as entrepreneurs, as business owners?
Well, you alluded to this a bit ago, but the root word of authority is author. And it's tough to become an authority without first becoming an author. And so crystallizing your thoughts and concepts that you're teaching in the written word as you lead, I think is one of the most powerful things that you can do. But then I would just, super practical and non-book related encouragement I would give to entrepreneurs, leaders, et cetera, is you never know the power that your words have to impact others. And so this is something that I'm working on personally, is when you think something positive about someone on your team, tell them, or even about someone in your life. And communicate to them the things that you see that they're doing well, the impact that what they're doing has on the mission and what you're working on. And I just think it's just, we live in a world where that doesn't happen enough. And I'm the first one to be guilty of that, where it's like, all right, cool, great job. All right, here's the 5 things you can improve. And I do that to myself. I do that to people around me, but that would be my encouragement for experienced, young, or emerging leaders, is encourage the people around you. Let them know that you appreciate them. Let them know the things that they're doing well and why they matter to you. And whether you're leading these folks, whether you're living with these folks, whether you're parenting these folks, when in doubt, share and encourage the people around you, because you never know how much that could mean to them. And especially the higher you get up the ladder and the more leadership influence that you have, a throwaway comment from you could be, it could be something that someone remembers 10 years later. So I think it's super important.
That's a great. And one of the things that relates to is, those are spoken words. You write those words down as well. I imagine that as at some point in time, I'll be writing a book, whether it's something that I ever want to make money off of, probably not, but it's something that's just directly to my son.
Yes.
To Paxton. This is, words that I've thought about in my life.
Yeah.
And I'm a words of appreciation guy. If you're a love language person, that's a huge part of the way that I receive it. So although that's not my dad, and it's still fun to read his book, because even reading his novel, I felt like I understood more of his story. He was a drug dealer, but that's a different story. Yeah. That's a different story for a different day. Hey, thank you so much, Chandler, for being on the program, for sharing this. I will put the link there, publishedbook.com/Mike, and I'll send that out also in my email list as well. Thank you so much for being on the program, though.
Mike, thank you so much.
Absolutely. And to all of our listeners, thank you for taking some time to listen, to watch, to be a part of this. Make sure that you like, subscribe, share, and visit publishedbook.com/Mike to get a free copy of the book that launched everything that I'm doing in this stage of life. Check it out.
Thanks for listening to Advance with Mike Acker, a podcast designed to provide an edge for leaders through improving practical leadership skills and increasing confidence in speaking. Mike is a best-selling author and business owner who has helped many leaders increase their skills and their confidence, propelling them to new heights in their personal and professional endeavors. Join an incredible group of professionals taking the steps to become better leaders at connect.stepstoadvance.com. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.